Hello friends, now today I thought we'd have a look at a slightly obscure bit of hardware from my Commodore Amiga collection. This bad boy is the Amiga A570 CD-ROM drive, and I believe this was Commodore's only external CD-ROM that they ever officially released. Obviously not including the ones in the CD-TV and the CD32 console. Now what this essentially does is it transforms a standard Amiga 500 into a Commodore CD-TV and lets you use CD-TV software on your A500. Now I actually got mine for Christmas in 1992. That was a good few months after it originally came out, and as you can see I was looking very cool and very happy with it on Christmas Day morning. Thing is, I got mine for £99 and they were bundling this with a CD-ROM public domain collection and a few games and stuff as well, like SimCity came with it and the Hutchinson's Encyclopedia. As by the end of 1992, about 6 months after this originally got released, they were flogging these off for a quarter of the original price. So it's fair to say this accessory was a total disaster from start to finish. Now the CD-TV came out in 1991 and it was meant to be, you know, for that market that never really emerged, the home multimedia living room device, which I've covered in other videos. I've done one on the CD-TV and its competitor, the Philips CDI, before. And this was always a bit of a bizarre decision to release, in my opinion. Obviously, Commodore wanted more people to be able to use CD-TV software, and the CD-TV itself is essentially just an Amiga 500 in a fancy black case. But really, they did compete with each other, really, because this was originally released at £399, and it was announced onto the market in late 1991 when the CD-TV was already on sale. Originally, this was called the Amiga A690 CD-ROM drive, and somewhere along the line, it got renamed to the A570, which, you know, being that it was intended for the Amiga 500 range, didn't make a lot more sense for it, you know, to have an Amiga 500 product range number. However, by the time this actually made it onto market, it was late spring or early summer of 1992, around 1 month after Commodore had officially discontinued the Amiga 500. What kind of logic is that? You're releasing your newest accessory for a machine that you've just killed off. And I remember walking into Dixon's and seeing one of these for the first time on the shelf, right next to Commodore's new Amiga, the Amiga 600, which this isn't compatible with. So there you go, that is Commodore logic all over. So looking at the machine itself, I mean, I think it is pretty stylish. It does slot onto the side of the Amiga 500. I'll show you it all set up and in operation in a moment. On the front, we have this rather large caddy-based CD-ROM drive. Single speed, single session, you know, very early CD-ROM. It's really slow, this thing. And like a lot of early CD-ROM drives, you needed these caddies to insert the discs into. So why this would work is you take your bit of software like this 17-bit demo collection for the CD-TV, remove your disc, and then you would insert it into this plastic caddy, close it up. As you can see, the disc is visible in there. A bit like a floppy disk, really. And then you would put it into the front of the drive, and the eject button would pop out. Very similar to a large floppy drive. And you've got two activity lights here, one for power and one for CD activity. You press that. It's quite hard to press. And the caddy pops out the front there. Around the rest of it, we have some a rather, you know, standard large headphone jack there. I was puzzling me as to why it was the larger style, but there you go. I guess they wanted it to appeal to audiophiles and that, maybe. You have a volume control here that controls the headphone output, and also, very usefully, if you turn it all the way to the left, you'll hear a little click. And that actually disables the CD-ROM drive, as quite a lot of Amiga 500 games either needed all of the Amiga's memory or they wouldn't load properly if you had this attached. So rather than unplugging it, you could just do that and disable the drive. Quite useful. On the side of it, we have a standard Amiga 500 expansion port connector, and on the back there are a couple of ports as well. Underneath this cover here, it's actually got the same expansion port as the Amiga CD-TV, so I think they did release like a Genlock for this, for video work, and also there was a SCSI interface that was released as well. It's very rare, there's not many of them around, but it did enable you to connect a hard disk as well, so you could have, you know, a bit of RAM and a hard disk connected into here that would stick out the back. There are some audio ports here as well, because this actually had CD-ROM audio output, but if you wanted the Amiga's audio, you'd need to mix it by plugging the Amiga's audio into here and then this into your hi-fi system. There is a standard power connector there that uses the usual big brick Amiga PSU, so you did need two of them to have these connected. Nothing on this side of it, and then on the bottom we just have some model number information, and like you did with a lot of these early CD-ROM drives, loads of Class 1 laser product warnings, you know, do not look directly into it, radiation and all that, which was a little bit worrying as a little kid when I did get my first Amiga CD-ROM drive. So let's get it hooked up and I'll show you it in operation. And here is my lovely Amiga 500 setup. Now, I've got the A570 CD-ROM drive attached. It's disabled at the moment. And as you can see from the Kickstart screen, we are running version 1.3 of the Amiga's Kickstart. Now, my A500 is actually a very early one, and it only had the 1.2 ROM, which the CD-ROM drive doesn't work with. So, for recording this video, I've had to borrow the 1.3 Kickstart ROM out of my Amiga CD-TV, which luckily appears to be working. So the fun begins when we enable the A570 and give the Amiga a reboot, and we should get the CD-TV intro screen, and there it is in all its glory. So as far as the Amiga is concerned now, it thinks it's an Amiga CD-TV. So I've got a bit of old school dance on here, the Kiss in Ibiza Anthems 1997. So I'll show you quickly playing audio CDs on here. So if we insert that, we then get the CD-TV's standard audio player interface. The big difference between the Amiga 500 with an A570 and a CD-TV is that, well, number one, you haven't got the remote control, which the CD-TV actually came with, which was quite handy. You'd think that Commodore would have just, you know, for the price they were charging for this, it was meant to be £400 originally. You'd think they'd have put a little infrared sensor on the front and bundled maybe a white one of these with it, but unfortunately they didn't. And also you don't have any of the physical audio CD controls. Luckily, this interface here is mapped to the Amiga's keyboard, so you can move around with the cursor keys. So, that's to press on here. As you can see, it's playing audio now via the output on the back of the A570. The Amiga's audio input goes into there as well, so it's all nicely mixed and outgoing to the monitor there. So that's pretty cool. And actually for a time, the A570 was my only audio CD player in my bedroom, so it did serve me well for many years. The real fun begins though when you play CD-TV titles on here. Now, if you watched my video on the CD-TV before, you'll know that there aren't really all that many actual CD-TV titles worth playing. This one here is called Super Games Pack. Now, I did get this with my A570 that I got for Christmas 1992 back in the old days. And obviously it does expect the CD-TV controller. Luckily though, you can map these to the Amiga's mouse and joystick, so you can control most of the CD-TV titles with the Amiga's standard peripherals. And even though this is not really all that impressive from a gameplay perspective, being able to hear like CD audio and digitized speech and that was pretty mind-blowing for me as a kid.
Hi, I'm Art Sestero, president of Odyssey Software. Welcome to Super Games Pack, our first CD-TV product.
I always thought these loading screens looked really funky though.
Please press the Joy mouse button to get into joystick mode. Our story begins.
And this always used to really impress me as a kid. Lunar Rescue it's called. Which was an animation for a game that never got released.
Mount Pleasant, Utah.
Ah, come and look what I found.
What is it, Professor?
This.
And obviously one of the original uses for the CD-TV was that it was intended to be a learning aid, and there was a lot of multimedia titles released on it. And these all work great on the A570 drive. As you can see here, CD-XL was an early full-motion video format developed by Commodore. I think it was actually the first one that could do streaming video from something that was definitely as limited bandwidth as a single-speed, single-session CD-ROM drive. As you can see, it didn't display full screen, but it was in colour and it moved pretty decently, and you got audio with it as well. Not bad for a 7 MHz, 1 megabyte machine. And this was a NASA 25th anniversary CD-ROM title that they released, featuring loads of video and also lots of information on here too.
It was called the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. a new independent agency created by President Woodrow Wilson in 1915.
And being that CD-ROMs were very expensive to produce back then, there's no copy protection on these, so if you want to download a copy of A Bun for Barney, an educational title off the internet, and burn it to a CD-ROM, it will work just fine.
A Bun for Barney. Based on a story by Joyce Dunbar with pictures by Emily Boone. This is a story about a bear called Barney and his cherry bun. Do you want to watch it? Then move the pointer on your television screen until it is over the picture of Barney.
But for me, the main attraction of the A570 when I was a kid was titles like this, the CDPD Fred Fish Public Domain Library. Now this had an entire 660 floppy disks on a single CD-ROM. You know, you're talking an entire public domain library, which at the time, you know, before that, you'd order your single PD discs from a library in an Amiga magazine, pay like maybe £3 or £4 and wait for it to turn up for like, you know, 2 weeks in the post. And then having access to all this software on a single CD-ROM was just incredible, as, you know, being an Amiga computer, it could actually just access software on CD from the Amiga Standard Workbench. So that's been a look at the Amiga A570 CD-ROM drive, quite a curious little peripheral that not many people seem to talk about or possibly even remember in this day and age, despite the fact that it was quite heavily hyped in a lot of the Amiga publications for a good year or two. And as I mentioned, you know, the fact that I owned one when I was a kid, I like to share my nostalgic memories and cool hardware from my younger years with you, and even for the fact that you can run those public domain CD-ROMs makes this a worthwhile addition to an Amiga 500 setup, I reckon, you know, if you can get one cheap enough. And maybe you're quite curious to try out some of those admittedly quite naff CD-TV titles. It is a way that you can check those out. So thank you for watching this vid. Any questions, leave them in the video comments box, and I will catch you in the next video.